Welcome to THESYSTEM.CA, the art and science of coaching, providing innovative information on new speed, power, recovery, wellness, strength, and conditioning for both athletes and active individuals.
Live. Yep, we're good. Okay, so today, it's been a while since I did my last podcast, but took a little bit of a hiatus to get some other stuff done. Today we have a special guest. His name is Cole Hergott. And did I pronounce that right, Cole?
You betcha, yep.
Okay, so Carl, I'm going to let you take it away, introduce yourself. Cole is basically a strength and conditioning coach out in Saskatchewan. And so I'm going to let him take it away. All right, Cole, go ahead.
For sure. Thanks, Yusuf. So happy to be on. So yeah, my name is Cole Hergott. I'm originally from Saskatchewan, but I'm actually currently the head strength and conditioning coach at Trinity Western University. I'm out in Langley, BC. So I moved out here to do my undergrad. Back in 2014, I started my undergrad out here at Trinity, and then worked my way up and got my master's degree and a whole bunch of other things. And now I'm in my 6th year as the head strength coach here at Trinity.
Awesome. And how'd you get involved in just like in what kind of led you into that S&C path? I mean, sometimes for some people, myself, I can only speak for myself, but I was a competitive athlete at one point, so I figure, okay, you know what, I kind of move into that direction. So, what about yourself?
Yeah, so very similar. Like I loved sports growing up, and I loved, getting better at them, and growing up through playing a bunch of different sports, I realized that the harder I worked, the more results I got. So I started to kind of fall in love with the off season. So for me, ice hockey was kind of my big thing growing up in Saskatchewan. Obviously, that's a big one. So had dreams of playing in the NHL and kind of went on YouTube and found all these videos and workouts and all this stuff. So I was like, okay, well, if this is what, NHLers are doing, this is what I got to do. So, went for runs, started, doing body weight exercises and stuff, just nothing crazy, but just really fell in love with the performance changes, but also the aesthetic changes that came with hitting puberty, but also just training my body and pushing it. So that's what kind of got me interested in weight training and that side of things. So then when I graduated from high school, I played junior hockey for a year, and then I came out here to Trinity, as I mentioned, to do my undergrad in exercise science, because through my time kind of in high school, it's like, okay, well, I like this stuff, so why don't I study this in university? But I didn't really know strength and conditioning was a profession yet until I came here on campus to play for the men's ice hockey team. And then I met my first strength coach, Andrew Hemming. And that was kind of just opened my eyes to, wow, like this is a profession. This is something I can do. And just the values he taught, the way Andrew carried himself, it just really just spoke to me as a person. Like, wow, like this is what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to, help people get better the way that, I tried to growing up as an athlete. And so that's kind of what got me interested in it and helped me realize it was a profession. And then through that, interned at a bunch of different places in my undergrad, including like as a undergrad intern here at Trinity for the Spartans, a couple other universities, worked at a private facility. And then kind of as I came to the end of my undergrad degree, I realized that the university setting was where I wanted to be. And I had some mentors speak into my life and be like, well, if this is where you want to be, you kind of need to get a master's degree. So I went to the University of British Columbia, which is in Vancouver, so like an hour from here, to get my master's degree. And then this job opened up halfway through my master's. And then here I am, 6 years later, after they decided to put me in charge, and kind of that's how it went.
Yeah. What'd you do your master's in?
Master's of Kinesiology in Coaching Science. So it was a theory based or coursework based, like it wasn't research based, because I have no desire to, become Dr. Cole and do a PhD. So that way I got to just intern a ton. I was a graduate assistant at UBC with the Thunderbirds varsity program, and learned obviously a ton there. Like that environment was just fantastic for my development. And then, yeah, here I am wearing the big boy pants, which is kind of crazy.
Right on. So who are your mentors? Like, who do you guys, when we growing up, like who'd you have? Like, oh, you know what, I'm going to emulate this guy.
So growing up, my dad was somebody who I really looked up to, and he taught me a bunch of values where, like, if you asked me that question when I was 18, I would have never said my dad. But the more I look back, now that I am a dad, the more I realize, wow, I'm exactly like my dad, which I think is a good thing. And it allows my wife and my mom to have a lot of funny conversations about what happens. But so my dad is one. But then from a purely strength and conditioning side, like Andrew Hemming, when I first met him, obviously like he became a mentor to me. And then from afar, Mike Boyle is somebody who, kind of was really big when I started. I mean, he still is, but like when I kind of started going up through the profession, and I started to consume a lot of his information through his podcast and through his books. And so he has shaped a lot of the underlying principles, I guess, to the way I program, the way I structure things. And then when I went to UBC, Joe McCullum, who is the head strength coach there, along with Amanda Jones and Tavis Bruce, who were the assistants at the time, they played a huge role in kind of shaping me. It's interesting because they all came at a different time. So my dad was obviously when I was younger, and then Andrew kind of got me introduced to the profession. Michael Boyle kind of helped me understand deeper things. And then when I realized like this is what I want to do, I want to be a university strength coach, and I found myself at UBC. This coaches there, so Joe, Tavis, and Amanda really kind of poured into me and helped me grow into the specific area of where I wanted to be. So I kind of had different mentors at different times, but all of them, I mean, as you know, like everybody shapes who you're going to be. So that would kind of be my main ones.
Right. Who do you follow right now? Who's kind of like on the hit list?
Oh man. I still follow a lot of Mike Boyle stuff. I'm trying to branch out outside of, I shouldn't say branch out of S&C, but dive into some more specific niche things. Like Jake Tura is someone who I follow as far as tendon stuff, along with Keith Barr. So trying to dive into, like how do we cure jumper's knee and Achilles stuff and everything else going on. Who else am I following? That's a great question. I'd have to check my Instagram list, but there's a ton of people, good qualified people that I follow. And it's for me, I try to follow a lot of people because I don't, and this was something even in my undergrad, the reason I interned at a bunch of different places was I didn't want to become the next Andrew Hemming. As much as I respected him and thought he was the best, and I still think he's the best, right. I wanted to become the best Cole Hergott. So I follow Michael Boyle, I follow Jake Tura, but I don't like do exactly what Mike Boyle does and what Jake does. Like I try to take those concepts, apply them to my specific scenario and my athletes. And, there's a lot of things they say that I don't agree with, but I don't, blaspheme them or shove them off to the side and say, oh, to heck with them. It's like, okay, how does that apply in my context? So I'd say now there's a bunch of people I follow from afar, but I try to keep it a bunch, and I try to follow people that I don't agree with. Like, for example, I follow Dr. Joel Seedman. I don't agree with 99% of the things that he posts, but it's really thought-provoking and helps me understand, other sides and maybe what athletes are seeing. And so that I can try to combat the questions of, hey, why aren't we doing this and all that kind of stuff.
I guess sometimes too, it's like when you follow certain people, you learn, you kind of, in a good way, you learn what not to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody has. I agree with that. I've had different people myself. I not everybody has the answers, and you have to look at your situation, your particular needs, who you're dealing with. You're 1 minute you're listening to this guy, and then a client could walk in and they have an injury, but that guy never talks about that. So you have to look, but it's the idea I call it sort of like populating your mind, and you're kind of planting these seeds, and then somehow the other, you get these thoughts and you can make a connection. Oh, this guy's talking about this and this guy's talking about this. And then you kind of put it, oh, wow. And then you get your own, it's an evolution in that sense. But yeah, that's really good that you have different people. I know some people kind of very, almost like zealot, like they follow this guy and whatever he says, they just hang off the, what's he going to say next? That's really good. So getting back to our conversation, what sort of assessment tools do you incorporate, protocols? I know you work with a bunch of athletes, so in different sports, so it's hard to kind of say, oh yeah, I use this, but what would you say is your kind of like your go-to, if you were to say, let's say top 5, maybe top 10, I'm not sure, things that you would use to assess athletes across the board? And then maybe, we live in Canada, so hockey, what would what would you do for hockey? What kind of KPIs would you use, assessment tools and stuff like that? Go ahead.
Absolutely. So to give listeners a little bit more context, so the sports I do work with, we have men's and women's basketball, men's and women's volleyball, men's and women's hockey, men's and women's soccer, men's and women's rugby, men's and women's track and field, cross country, and then also disc golf. So a wide range of athletes. And what I try to do is yes, each team has a little bit of a different assessment protocol, but they all come down to the same bucket. So I'm always trying to look at some kind of speed metric, some kind of power metric, some kind of, well, most teams do like a sport specific agility thing, or a change of direction, I should say, not necessarily agility, depends on how you classify it. And then we're also looking at some lifting measures, so like strength. So what we've kind of, what we had to go down to give listeners a short version of a long story, our weight room is quite small. So we work with about 300 athletes, and we're in a 1,100 square foot old classroom. So it's not very big. We have our gymnasium, which is like directly across the hall, which is perfect because then we could do our sprints, our jump testing, everything. The issue with that is that our gym gets used by, our exercise science classes, it gets used by recreation, it gets used by, average users, like it gets booked out all the time. So what I found throughout my last 6 years is every year I kind of had to less and less time with it as the gym just got busier with other things, and we added more classes, which is great, but that means less time for me. And so what we used to do with most teams was we would do either a 10 or a 20 meter sprint. In our gym, we would do a broad jump, we would do, vertex jumps for volleyball and all those things. But what I found is that we were only being able to test like 40 to 50% of the athletes because, only half the time we were able to get in the gym, and then the other half we couldn't. And so now we're not getting any sprint data, or I'm only being able to sprint like 3 people on the men's basketball team. And I'm trying to go to the coach and say, well, like, I don't know if we're faster or not because, one of those guys was sick, the other guy didn't try, and the third guy's an all-star that gets better no matter what we do. And so that became really difficult. So what I implemented just this past year, so we're just finishing up the last year with it, of keeping the same testing protocol for all of our team, well, for most of our teams, so that when we're running our sessions, regardless of who's in, we just have like testing weeks or testing like days. So we'll do it on like a Monday, Tuesday, and everybody gets their testing done, and then we go through it. So the testing protocol is we do a sprint in our weight room. So in our 1,100 square foot weight room, we do a 3 meter sprint, which is the longest distance I can get that safely allows them to decelerate without smacking into the wall. So everyone does a 3 meter sprint. We have Hawken Dynamics force plate, so we do a vertical jump on there, and we've always kind of done that. Then we've got our a broad jump for some of our teams. So our rugby and our hockey teams will do a broad jump. Then we take body weight for most of our teams, and then we do a squat, bench, and a chin up test using velocity-based training units. So we use OVR, velocity-based training units. And what I've done is, because some of our teams, our rugby teams would do 1 rep max testing because our coaches want us to follow Rugby Canada protocols, which is awesome, but it becomes really difficult to 1 rep max test athletes in season or, during exams. And it was just a logistical nightmare. So when I got these velocity-based training units about 3 years ago, I realized this was a really good opportunity to use them for testing. But I didn't really like the current protocols of like, hey, use 80% of their 1 rep max and see how fast it moves and whatever, because when I have a room of 25 athletes and 5 squat racks, it becomes a logistical nightmare of like, well, what's 80% of your 1 rep max? Well, what's your, like, how do we, anyway. So what I did was I came up with essentially arbitrary numbers for males and females, and we track how fast they move that weight. So for males, they do 135 back squat, 135 bench press, so a 45-pound plate. And then females do 95-pound back squat, 75-pound bench press, and then everybody does a body weight chin up. So I have a bungee cord, they put it around their waist, they strap the velocity-based training unit, which is a linear position transducer, to their belt, and then they boom, do a chin up, how fast. And so we will test that about 5 or 6 times a year to track progress. Just, hey, it's testing day, everything's set up, get your tests done, record it in a Google Sheet, and then I've got that data. And then that way, once again, I can see, okay, if you're moving 135 faster, the idea is that you've gotten stronger or more powerful, or, and then it doesn't, like, we've tested like the week going into like playoffs or the week going, into a big game. And it's like, well, this is probably actually less fatiguing than a normal 3x5 or 3x3 squat workout. So coaches love it. Athletes love it. It's a little bit of a mental break, and I get a lot of good data from it. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of what we are doing with our testing currently, just because of the logistics. And the benefit is, before I mentioned we were only testing, maybe 40 to 50% of our athletes. Now the only people we aren't testing are the ones that like are hurt and unable to, do a chin up, or, they hurt their knee so they can't do the squat. So our testing, I'm getting like 90 to 95% of everybody. And I know a 3-meter sprint isn't as good as a 10 or a 20 meter or a 40 meter, but to me, testing 95% of athletes in a 3-meter is better than testing 40% of athletes in a 10-meter to track progress. And so it just gives me a more well-rounded piece of data to change programming, or to present that to coaches with, hey, we're progressing, we're not, we need to back things off, as opposed to, again, being like, well, one of your athletes is good, one of them is bad, and I didn't test anybody else. So that's our testing protocol.
There's a couple of interesting points you made there. One is obviously you're working around the logistics, which I think a lot of times people get hung up and like, okay, you know what, I gotta do that 40-yarder, and truly, working with a few sprinters myself, and I start off with how do they stand upright, number one. Then how do they walk? The walking will dictate a lot how they run. How they run will dictate how they will sprint. And then in terms of like, the setup when you do the sprint thing, I was told by somebody, your how you set up for the start will determine the first 3 steps. First 3 steps determine the first 10 meters. The first 10 meters will determine the next 30, and the next 30 will then determine the last 70 meters for 100, for example. So it all starts from, you got to get that start right. Once you get that start right, you can, and the other thing too is that you made a really interesting point. You're kind of working within a fatigue zone too. Like, you don't want to kill them too much. At the same time, you want to get your numbers right. So, which is really a good point, because I think sometimes people fail to realize when you're testing people, you don't want to kill them. It's a test, and one thing I realized too, sometimes, like, you want to test them in a way that they don't fail, because it's a psychological thing. We went to school, right? And you get tested, right? Did you pass? Did you fail? Kind of thing. If you got an F, or you got a D-, whatever, C or whatever. So it's like it's a good boost. Like, if you give somebody some within their wheelhouse, they can test. So, and I think just the fact that you were forced to kind of work in this confined logistical environment, you kind of worked out your own sort of testing protocol, which is really cool, because I know it's not standard, typical this, typical that, but the key word for me is relative. Whether the person, you spot them, you test them for max for this exercise, but then, you go back and do another way, it's all relative, right? If I have a scale and you have a scale, yours says 145, mine says 150, but you gain 5 pounds. Well, it's relative. The 5 pounds is the key. It's not the original weight, maybe, but it's the 5 pounds that we know that we both agree on, right? So, but anyway, that's a really good point, how you kind of work your way around that logistical situation. And how would you go ahead?
So just to jump in on that too, like, well, number one, that the posture thing, 100% agree with. Like, and I tell our athletes that all the time. Like, the way you set up for a bench press is going to help you be successful in that movement. The way you set up for, a sprint, like 100%. And I'll often coach our athletes on their first few steps in a sprint, like if we're just doing like a sprint session, because that's what I'll tell them, exactly what you said. Like, if you drive out hard in the first 3 steps, chances are you're not going to suck in the next 5. Like, it kind of just bleeds into itself. And then, just on that last point too, about like the relative stuff, that's something I'm trying to wrap my head around even a little bit more, because as coaches, we're so inundated with like, well, is this good? Like, are my athletes getting better? What are other universities doing? Like, how do we compare to that? And at the end of the day, I have to do a better job, and this testing protocol helps me do it, of like, who cares? Like, who cares what UBC is doing? Who cares what University of Alberta is doing? Like, we need to get athletes better. It doesn't matter if like you just said, it doesn't matter if our athletes are slower or faster than someone else. Are they getting faster?
Yes.
Are my athletes getting faster every day? Are they getting stronger every day? And, it doesn't matter if I'm hitting U of A standards or UFV standards, like that. Those aren't my athletes. These are my athletes, and my job is to get them better. And so, yeah, the issue becomes then when athletes are trying to compare, like, is this good? Is this bad? Like, when I first started testing this 3 meter and everyone's like, oh, is this fast? I'm like, I actually don't know. Like, you guys are the first group to do it. So by now I obviously have an idea of like, oh, wow, that's fast or that's not. And, but it just has become something that is uniquely us. And again, whether that's good or bad, I like your take on it, where it's like, it's all relative. So why don't we just do a better job with our people? And hopefully that puts some W's up on the board, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Who cares if we're slower than UFE? If we beat them on Friday night, that's what matters. If our athletes are healthy enough to do that, that's a win. So, yeah, I love that point.
So, just to add to that, one of the key things I do when I test is make sure, number one, don't hurt the athlete. So, I mean, the 3 meters, listen, the chances of somebody getting hurt, tearing a hamstring in the first 3 meters, pretty slim.
Yeah.
You test them for a 40, between 30 and 40, something might go. And what happens now? So you got your number, but did you really get your number? Well, you subjected the person to more fatigue, which is, and the other question, the other thought that you proposed is the fatigue aspect, is that you don't want to kill them. You just want to get a number, right? And one of the things I like to add is working with the late Charlie Francis. I had some interaction with him when he was alive, way back when. And I asked him one time, because I did all the fitness assessment stuff, advanced stuff at York University. We did the ECG, we did the VO2 max testing, all that anaerobic threshold, lactate testing, blah, blah, blah. And I asked him one time, I said, so Charlie, how do you test your athletes? Like, how do you find out their percent body fat? Do you use like a Uhas equation? What do you, underwater weighing? And he goes, come here for a second. So he came by my side and he pinched my iliac crest, which is just, around this on the waist there. And he says, you're about 8% body fat. And he was pretty well dead on. And then I asked him, I said, well, how do you test for speed? Like, what do you do? He says, he went in his pocket and he whipped out a stopwatch. I'm like, I think that's all you do? It's like, yeah. I said, if the athlete's going faster, he's going faster. I don't need to know exactly how much force they're putting in the ground. Guess what? If they're going faster, put more force in the ground, right? It's like, So
I love that.
It's got sometimes simplicity is complexity, right? But so getting back to this thing here about, the big buzz I think nowadays too is, injury prevention. I like to use the word injury potential, because I don't think you can prevent an injury. It's impossible. But I think you can probably lower the risk. So what do you do? How do you, work with your athlete to tell them, hey, you know what? Do you tell them to do like some, obviously, soft tissue work on their own? Like, what do you do typically?
Yeah. So one of the ways we do, well, our therapy team here at Trinity does a good job of like doing an intake assessment as far as like, concussion protocols and movement stuff. So we do a little bit of that. But what I'll do in the weight room specifically is, just this past year, we started doing with our force plates. So Hockey Dynamics are dual force plates, so they have a left and right. So in our jumps, we can look at left and right asymmetries. I also just started getting each athlete to do like a single leg jump on their left and a single leg jump on their right, so that we can look at a little bit of left-right differences. I just started that this past year, so I don't have a ton of data and I haven't necessarily acted on it yet, but that is something I'm planning on doing more of like, okay, wow, you have like a 20% deficit. Like, that is something we need to address, or, it's a 3.5% deficit, you're fine. So I'm going to start diving into that a little bit more. But what we'll do on a day-to-day is, I like to think, is like, as Charlie Weingroff has said, like, training is rehab, rehab is training. So I design our training protocols to handle all the, main movement patterns, squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, all that stuff. But then each team will have, at the end of their session, like as part of their C or D block, we'll have a little bit of just some injury, as you said, like injury reduction kind of stuff. We're not going to prevent injuries. They're high performing athletes, and the higher your performance is, the higher your risk of injury. And so we're never going to have, zero injuries, unfortunately. But one of the things we'll look at is what is a common injury in that sport. And so I'll communicate with our therapy team, because again, what I don't want to do is say, okay, soccer players have hamstring injuries, so we're going to do a bunch of hammy work. Well, guess what? Our soccer teams actually don't have a bunch of hamstring injuries. We have quad injuries. And so now I'm actually attacking the wrong thing. So again, going back to that, everything's relative. I'll talk to our therapy team about what they are seeing with our athletes, and then I'll implement stuff there. So again, our soccer team typically doesn't have a ton of hamstring stuff, but with our women's soccer team, we've had a lot of quads in the last number of years. And so we'll tackle a little bit more, quad work, whether it's, maybe it's some hip mobility work because of, things that way, or it's just doing a little bit of extra quad strength work or isometric stuff, movement mechanics. Like there's a whole bunch of different things we'll dive into, but each team will have a little bit of, prehab or rehab work at the end of their workout, just so that we're tackling the most common things we see in that sport. So volleyball does a little more shoulder stuff. Rugby does a little bit of shoulder and some extra ab work, just making sure they're prepped for contact and the demands of their sport. But a lot of it just comes down to, as we chatted about, the relativeness and like what actually is going to help my athletes, not just athletes in general.
Right. In terms of, you mentioned, you checking to see the asymmetry in the left and right. One way you can do that without even, definitely what you're doing with the force plates, kind of maybe concurring with this, but a low tech version. What I use in my office is I have two scales. There's two scales, just like the typical bathroom scales that you would see, and I'd buy two of the same ones, and I put them I had a friend of mine. He does carpentry, so we kind of put them in a little box, and you can put the scales in there, and then I have the client. I always have one scale with an L on it. That's the left scale, so we don't get them all kind of keep it something standardized, and then just have the person stand on the scales with their eyes closed. Kind of make sure they don't tip over. But the idea is you have them or look straight ahead, because as soon as they look down, they can alter their weight shift, right? And then from there you can see, they have if it's like a 5-pound weight shift, it's not too bad. 10 pounds, you want to kind of be concerned. 15, 20 pounds. I had one client with an ACL that had a 30-pound shift on one leg. Yeah. So you can tell that guy's not going to be doing any squatting.
That's a really good idea, actually. I like that.
Yeah. The other thing too here is a little side. I know this podcast is more about you than it is about me, but the problem I think in the day, I'm close to 60 now, so we didn't have cell phones back then, so we used to go out and play. Kids these days, and the generation that maybe you're dealing with, they're especially the kids that had the cell phone and all that stuff from the age of, let's say, 4 or 5, right? They constantly crane their head down like this. So typically what you're going to find is with that sort of scenario, so watch them when they're using their cell phones. Are they craning their head down? If they crane their head down, okay, the pelvis will rotate in that manner, because you're kind of what you're kind of doing is you're going into that fetal position. It's the precursor to that. If you're going to go down and fall into that fetal position, you're going to crane your head down, and then you're going to turn your hips forward. And so they kind of come in with that fixated position. And so if you get them to use the cell phone with their elbows up on their chest, on their ribs here, they'll keep their head neutral. And so they come in slightly, practice makes permanent, right? So the idea is that you might get that pelvis a little bit more neutral. That's just something I've noticed. I work with little kids sometimes, and I work with older adults, and I see that a lot with the younger kids. Not as much with the older kids. With the adults, I call them older kids. But yeah, but that's what I don't know. That's just an aside. You can play around with that. I'm not saying that's 100%. You can find that all the time, because there's other little caveats with that. But it's a good place to start.
Yeah. So. No, I 100% agree with that. Like, and I talk to our athletes about that all the time. Like, whether they're on their phone and when they're not on their phone, they're in class, so they're sitting down looking at a textbook, or they're looking at their laptop.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it's I was talking to our soccer guys the other day. He was complaining about like his hip mobility and like what he should do about it. And I'm like, look, I can't remember who said it, but I just learned it recently, that trying to change an athlete's mobility in season, especially as a student athlete, is like trying to change a tire on a moving car. It's like, it just ain't gonna happen. And so it's one of those things where I told him, I was like, you need to work hard just to maintain what you have. But I said, once you're in the off season and you're not like in class, and you're maybe working landscaping job, or you're whatever, just on your feet more, then you have a chance to actually do something about it. But yeah, like it's our lives are in front of us. They're right here on our phones, in our laptops.
Yes.
Like, you're right. Everything just puts it forward. And I remember even Matt Wenning said once, like, there's a reason you don't see an old person, like an old grandma, walk around leaning back. They're leaning forward, because gravity, everything is in front of you. And so you need to do, his point was, you need to do a ton of posterior chain work
Yes.
to open up and strengthen that side. But yeah, we're fighting an even bigger losing battle than 20 years ago, like you just mentioned, because of it's even more in front of us. It's phones, it's devices, it's everything. And not that they're all bad, obviously, but they definitely do not help our posture and our movement at all.
Yeah. There's stuff we could probably do a podcast on that alone. I got some stuff, but I don't want to. This is your time, not my time. But anyways, so how do you incorporate some recovery methods? What do you like to do? What do you have access? Like the students have access to? Do you guys have like a cold tub, or do you guys do kind of that stuff? I mean, I'll be foam roller, massage stick. I think that's pretty well standard. Lacrosse ball. That's like standard ops now. What else do you kind of do? Anything innovative?
Yeah, so we have the lacrosse ball, foam rollers, massage guns. I have a bunch of those in our weight room, and so athletes, if they come early, they can use them. Or I'll have some of our teams, especially like our hockey teams, in their program is a 5-minute foam roll at the end of workout, whether it's on their hips or their back or whatever's kind of bugging them.
Right.
So I'll implement that a little bit. We do in our therapy room, which is kind of just on the other side of the building, we do have access to hot tub and cold tubs. At
Nice.
the rink, or our sports, our court sports and our ice sports play at the Langley Event Center, which is kind of just about 10-minute drive away, but they have like a little therapy room there with the same thing. They got hot tubs, cold tubs. So I don't necessarily have a specific protocol like, hey, you should be doing this, but a large majority of our athletes do that anyway. But my biggest thing for recovery is just educating them on the importance of getting a good night's rest, on the importance of proper nutrition. And then what I just started this year too is giving them stuff to do on the weekend. So giving them a recovery session, giving them a mobility session, because what I have found personally, and what most of the research shows, is like movement is medicine and motion is lotion. So instead of, hey, you just played on Friday, Saturday, so sit on the couch and do nothing on Sunday, or sit there and look at your phone, as we just talked about, and curl up and just expect to like open up like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon on Monday. That don't happen. And so what I advocate a lot for our athletes is like, go for a walk, do 10-15 minutes of mobility work, do almost like what we would do for a warm up here, like a dynamic warm up with some mobility work, because that's going to get more blood flowing, which is going to enhance your recovery. It's going to help your mental, your cognition and your mental acuity for your studying. And then it's going to help set you up for more success on Monday when you come into lift or practice or whatever your first activity is. Instead of, man, I haven't done anything since Saturday night. It's like, wow, I actually feel pretty good, because I went, I'm not telling athletes, we live in BC, so there's beautiful hikes they can go on, but I'm not saying go on a 3-hour hike and cook yourself. But like, go for a walk, go outside, like, I don't care, jump on a treadmill, go on a bike, do a little flush ride. But for me, the biggest recovery is just motion, is just using the body, letting it heal itself, and giving it the opportunity, watching Netflix and doing nothing about it.
Right. I use the analogy of telling the people I work with. I mean, lions are always in the move, right? And they don't go to the zebra. Hey, dude, hold on for a second. I gotta do some foam rolling before we start. And the zebra's like, oh, before you chase me, hold on. I got a little niggle in my my hamstring here. Hold on for a second.
Let me stretch.
They're always good to go. It's They're always good to go. Anytime someone walks by, they're going for it. So,
Yeah.
So in terms of monitoring, what do you do for monitoring? I know a lot of people use, obviously, like the smart watches and stuff like that. They track their sleep and whatnot. What do you prefer? What do you like and what don't you like? What do you think? What's practical for you in terms of, obviously, because you work with a large group of athletes? What do you find that works for you?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different based on our teams, based on what they have access to. So we have the force plates, and I try to get all of our athletes to do a counter movement jump at least once a week, so that way we can track again their performance from a height and a power and a readiness standpoint. That doesn't always get done because once again I can't stand at the force plates and wrangle 300 kids all day. But our women's soccer team has access to GPS units, Catapult GPS. So that's something we use in season where we're looking at. For me, like those kind of things track so many metrics, and it becomes, same thing with force plates, I guess. Like it just, you're just drowning in all the data. So I've tried to pick a few key things and look at that. So with our women's soccer team, I'll look at their top speed. I'll look at their high speed running. And then I'll look at their player load. So a little bit of, top speed for me is more of a performance thing. Like, are we getting faster? Then with their their high speed running, it's okay, how long were you running? How intense was kind of this week or this session? And then their player load again looks at a little bit of, with the change of directions and impacts and kind of compiles it all into one number so that I can see how, for lack of a better word, how hard was that week or that session for that one player compared to another. Because high speed running is good, but it's, depending on the position, like you're not, a midfielder's not doing as much high speed running as a winger, or, maybe depending on who we're playing, we're playing a different system. And so I find player load is really helpful in that regard. So they're the only team that has access to that though. And then with our women's volleyball team, what I started doing, because their coaching staff is really bought into kind of the sports science side and wanting to actually use the data. So what I used to do with them was just send their coaches the counter movement jump reports, like, hey, our jump heights are up. But there's so many things that go into a jump height. Like you could have changed your depth, you could have changed your strategy. And so after doing that for a year, I was like, okay, I feel like this isn't really hitting what I want. So we started doing a counter movement rebound jump with them. So they basically do 2 jumps on the plates back to back. And then I look at their ground contact time on that second jump, and then their jump height on that second jump. And then that gives me the MRSI, so modified reactive strength index, which is just their jump height divided by their contact time, with the goal being you want a higher number, which would be a higher jump height for a shorter contact time.
Contact time, right?
Because what I've told our athletes is, like, when you feel like crap, you might still jump high, but it's going to be slower. So I want to catch that. I want to see how fast, how springy are you. So every Monday when the girls come in, they do a rebound jump, and then I send that data to the coaches. So we look at their contact time. So, hey, like, and it's not like I'm not sending every single athlete's data. I'm literally sending kind of the team snapshot, and it's just a quick little summary of like, hey, the contact times are shorter and the jump heights are higher. The ladies are looking good. Or, wow, we were really slow off the plates today. The jumps were down, maybe we want to back off today. And then that might lead to a deeper conversation. But at the end of the day, that's kind of just the one team I'm doing that with, that I'm planning on implementing more. But this was the first year I kind of did the rebound. But those are the two, I guess, outside the norm monitoring that we do. Once again, everything else is just the weekly force plate jumps, and then our testing. So to kind of go back to our testing, the way it used to be when we did like the 10 meter and the spike touch and all that, we would test that maybe 3 times a year. So we would do it at training camp. We would do it in August, September. We would do it at the end of November before exams. And then we would do it usually the week before playoffs. And I know a lot of coaches will test like at the end of the season, like in March or April. And to me, like, while that's valuable, it really means nothing. Like, I don't care how high we jump 2 weeks after nationals. I care how high we jump, right before nationals, or when we're actually, when we need to be at our best. So I'll test us right before the end of the season. And I found that has gotten us a lot better results. So then with the new testing protocol, with that 3 meter sprint and the squat, bench, chin up stuff, as I mentioned, we test that every month. So we'll do 6 to 7 times a year. So that kind of becomes almost like less of a testing protocol and more of a monitoring tool of, okay, is this program working? So that, once again, is across the board. Everybody does that, but the specific ones is just the GPS with women's soccer and then the rebound jump with women's volleyball.
Right. There's a couple interesting points I want to maybe throw in. I guess with the larger group that you have to really dial it down to the most simplest testing, the least amount of elements that you're going to test that give you the most sort of, I guess, data, which leads me to the next thing. You might want to try this. You get those little tally counters. If you go to a nightclub, the guys, the bouncers usually get, because obviously they have a capacity, how many people they can let in and out, in that facility, right? So they keep track of how many people are in there, right? Mm-hmm. What you could try, and this is interesting here. If you do that, let's say before a workout, and it's like a 10-second dominant hand, right? You can measure left and right if you want. How fast can they click it? Now, anything below 50, roughly, you probably want to do it like an easy workout. And you can correlate this with other metrics. This is like if you're left with like, okay, I told you, Cole, you only had one thing to test. And this thing has to tell you everything, right? If it goes above, let's say 60, you can do a lot of speed work in that day. You're good, right? So, and interesting, if you did that, let's say, if you could get, I'm not sure what the regulations are at university for, do the kids come in and train during exam period, or they basically like, is it completely off? Like in the NCAA, you can't touch them.
Here we train during exams.
Okay, interesting to note. You do it before exams, during exams, and after exams. You do the little tally counter. And correlate that if you can, just for like shits and giggles here. I'm not saying you might find that you might tell it's not nothing, it's nothing. But I've noticed this. It's one of the things I use, very simple. I said, what's your number today? And then from there, the dialogue will go into. I remember asking Charlie one time. He said, "What do you do? How do you test?" Right? Because they didn't have all these things that we have right now, force plates and all that. So he said, "What do you do?" He says, I ask him, "How do you feel today? What did you do last night? What was you sleep?" And he carries this conversation, and then he'll say he watches their mannerisms, how they walk in. Do they have interaction with other athletes? Is it antagonistic? Is it like they're pretty quiet? Like every athlete's different, but if a guy's really sort of out there with his, he's a bit more social, all of a sudden now he's quiet. The guy who's maybe very quiet, they're more vocal in terms of like they're very irritated or something like that. So he watches all this, and as they're doing a warm up, he's watching to see how they move, and then he'll kind of maybe walk. He'll kind of pick one or two people. Like he thinks, what? Hey, I got to check this person out. So he'll talk to them. Say, hey, what'd you do last night? What happened? What's going on? Without getting too personal, but so listen, everything good. And sometimes they might reveal stuff, sometimes they may not. But you get a pretty good idea, and then you can maybe you correlate that with the tally device. I don't know. That's just one of the little things I use, amongst other things. But that's like a quick and dirty for me. It's like, okay, 10 seconds. How fast can you do it?
Yeah, so. I like that. And I 100% agree with Charlie's approach, and I try to do that as well. Is just touch base with everybody every session, because that's going to give you that, that qualitative data is probably better than quantitative data as far as like, yeah, your force plate jump sucked, but if you feel really good, then let's get after it. And I know even like the tally clicker, I remember Dan John talking about doing the same thing, but you just take a pen and a piece of paper and you try to like dot it as many times as you can, and then you count the dots. Yeah, exactly. Like that, and 100% that works. Like you don't need force plates, you don't need GPS units. All you need is a good coaching eye, good communication, and then maybe some way to kind of catch them, because if every time they're like, oh yeah, I feel great, then you're going to maybe be a little bit suspicious. But yeah, I like that idea of essentially free, like you buy one of those tally things and you're good. And or even on a phone, I guarantee you go on a phone, I bet you there's an app that just counts how many times you can tap the screen.
There is.
I have that. Exactly. Yeah, so you get that done, and there you go. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, That's I'll have to tell you a joke off camera, but yeah, it comes to I'll tell you a joke if you want to hear about this, but we'll go back to that. Anyways,
Yeah.
So in terms of testing, you test like some of the stuff once a month, some of the stuff you're doing on a weekly basis. Like obviously the strength stuff, obviously you're testing more once a month, but obviously more noticeable changes in that as opposed to testing every week, right? And then obviously your counter movement jumps, you're seeing do once a week, and GPS data, which is really interesting. Does that also come with the heart rate as well, or is that just tells you how many meters?
It does come with heart rate, but it's unreliable. Like we've had some girls where they'll play a 90-minute soccer match and it says they have 89 minutes, in the red zone of above 85, percent. And so I've talked to some of our coaching staff and it was like, oh yeah, she wasn't even playing. Like she was on the bench half the game. So it's like, okay, well then it's like she's either really, really nervous and just like super ramped up, or whatever. So I don't tend to use the heart rate data. I want to,
Right.
like what I'm trying to do with our coaches with the GPS, because our soccer coaches are really big on fitness, and so we'll do fitness tests quite frequently. But of course, as we talked about before, like there's the fatigue aspect. You don't want to, like, it's stressful running a fitness test all the time. And so what I'm trying to come up with is a standard drill that our girls do. You run to the half and back twice, or like, I don't know, just something super standard, take a 1 or 2 minute break, and then you do that again. And then you track the heart rate. And then the goal being that they're able to perform that activity, whether with a quicker recovery time in between, or maybe they're able to get their heart rate higher because they're able to push themselves higher, or they're able to perform it at in the same time frame, but with a lower heart rate. Anyway, we're kind of playing around with that. But again, the heart rate isn't super accurate with the way I've looked at it so far. And so I haven't put my eggs into that basket, but that for sure is something I think would have a bunch of value, even from the soccer coach. Because then instead of running a yo-yo or, a beep test that is, less than sport specific, it's like, hey, let's make this drill a super standard drill that's, controllable, as specific as you want it. Like make it whatever movement you want. And then we just get the girls to do that every single week or every couple of weeks. They don't even know we're testing them. It's just like, hey, we're doing the Cole drill, like whatever it is. And then I just pull the data from that. So again, we haven't quite gotten to that, but I think that would be super valuable for coaches that have, any other staff like mine that's like really big into fitness and wants to do some kind of an assessment or test all the time.
Yeah. Well, what you might want to try, this is what I do with the athletes, especially for like in the running sports. They do a sequence of little bunny hops. Like we're not even talking like we're going for serious amplitude here. We're just talking about just like serious, and can they use your ankles? And they go through a series of bunny hops going forward, backwards, sideways, side to side, and from that, you can usually with the first couple, you'll see the ones that have a lot of, actually it comes to mind here. It's a little cartoon. Remember Gary Larson?
I don't know.
The cartoon strip called Far Side?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He was a little bit off color sometimes, but anyway, he was an interesting. I used to love this guy. Anyways, he had this one cartoon strip, right? And basically, it was two lions, and in the distance was these two gazelle, right? And on the rump of both gazelle, it said turbo on it. And it's the lions that are talking to each other and they're saying, yeah, we had to pass on these ones. So what I'm getting at is here is if you have a bunch of people doing that, you can categorize pretty quickly, and it's all relative. Like if you tell them what to feel, and you say no, last week you did the same warm up, and this week you're jumping a lot less, right? So you kind of, and then what I do is like, and I would, because I worked with one soccer team one time, I would, sort of like silo certain girls. Okay, you're on this side. So the girls that could jump really well today, they're going to do a little bit more speed or acceleration work. The girls that basically are walking around like baby elephants, they're going to do some mobility, ab work, whatever, low tempo, run on grass, low tech force plate. Just to see, hey, can they? And obviously you have to make sure the surface is, consistent. You put them on Mondo, you put them on turf, you're going to get a different result. But by and large, you're going to see a little bit more spring. And the guys that have more spring, well, you can, if you test them, I'm pretty sure you're going to get some good metrics out of them, right? Versus the people that basically run around like baby elephants, they're not going to probably give you some numbers that day. But anyway, that's just an aside. So, but so how in terms of like templates, do you work? You work with such a large group of people. I mean, you must have like some templates you kind of go to. Okay, this is what I'm going to do for a squat, or or do you kind of just sometimes are you finding yourself sort of like winging it half the time, and you going with the flow? Like you kind of have to make up stuff on the fly. Like how do you operate that way?
So I've come up with a template for our programming that kind of works in our situation, and it's very similar to what most coaches would do, but it's something that I've been tweaking over the years and kind of adding and subtracting things. But basically what it comes down to is all of our sessions, we start with our sprint and jump and throw. So whether that's just a sprint or it's a jump and a throw or it's a sprint and a throw, there's always some aspect of that to start our session, after a warm-up, of course. And then we head into our main lower body movement. So a squat, a hinge, might be a hang clean that day. So we'll do some kind of a lower body movement. And then we do our push and our pull. So a bench in a row, or a single arm shoulder press and a chin up, just something to hit the lower or upper body, sorry. And then we'll go into kind of our accessory work, or kind of that prehab stuff, which for every team will be some kind of a single leg movement that is different from our main movement. So if we did a squat that day, we're not going to do a lunge, we're going to do a single leg RDL, we're going to do a single leg hip thrust, or something of that nature. And then we'll do some kind of core work, and of course there's endless numbers of things in that regard, and as well as then we're looking at maybe some extra accessory work, as we talked about. So extra shoulder work for rugby and volleyball, extra hip and ankle work for soccer, or those kind of things. But I've found that has been a template that works really well from a physical performance standpoint, but it also works really well from a structure and in our weight room standpoint, because then we go from, hey, we're in our gym, or we're outside doing our sprint, jump and throw, and then we're at the racks doing our main movement, and then then we're using the benches and the dumbbells, and then we're you can grab the mats and do your core stuff or whatever anywhere. So it just kind of flows, so that if a session does run over, and I've got some athletes that are taking extra time, or they were lollygagging during the workout, they're finishing with like I said, ab stuff. So when the next group rolls in and they need to use the racks or squats, it's not a big deal. Like I'm not finishing with squats on the other group and then going, well, shoot, now I don't know what to do. That's kind of how I start the year, and how I'll structure kind of things in the off season where I don't typically see athletes. But by now, so now that we're pretty much at the end of our seasons, those same kind of principles are in there, but it's kind of morphed a little bit as, once again, as I work with the kids I'm seeing, okay, hey, this isn't actually working with our women's basketball team. We need to try this. Like there's sometimes, we'll maybe hit our upper body movement first on a Monday or on a Tuesday, because they get ran really hard on a Monday and their legs are sore the next day, or those kind of things. So I will play with it a little bit. But for example, if you were to say, hey, Cole, you're going to work with a brand new team, you've never seen them before, what are you going to do? I'm going to follow my template as much as possible. And then absolutely, there's adjustments that happen on the fly, and it does feel like I'm winging it, but a lot of that winging it comes just from winging it becomes going back to the template and like, okay, what is, where's my safe space? Where's my blankie that I can hold on to and I know it's going to work? And that ends up being kind of this template.
Right. So how many times a week would you have the athletes typically in the weight room?
Depends on the team, at least 2. So a lot of our teams are doing 2 in season, like soccer's only lift 2 in season. Most of our teams will see me 3 times. And then I've got a couple teams, so men's rugby and men's volleyball see me 4 times. So wow. Yeah, so it obviously gets structured a little bit different, so that the total weekly volume isn't like exponentially higher for those 4-day-a-week teams. And then the 2-day-a-week teams, there is a third day, because if kids don't get selected to travel on the weekend, they'll come in on the Friday and get a session in, so they become a 3-day-a-week team. But it's at least 2, but on average, I see kids about 3 times a week.
Okay. And roughly about an hour do you have them for? Or
we have hour-long slots. In season, our workouts take us 40, 45 minutes. Like it's, as we talked about earlier, like the fatigue aspect is huge. So it's like I don't need to drain more energy from these kids that they already don't have because they didn't eat breakfast and they didn't sleep. Like, I'm not going to steal more, but in the off season, yeah, our workouts will take, about an hour, because we'll add in the conditioning work and a little more speed stuff. So we're pushing closer to 65, maybe 70 minutes in the off season.
Right. Wow. And do you tend to, I guess, within a group, do you tend to silo some athletes together? Like, okay, you pair this guy up. How do you work in a large group like that?
Yeah, it becomes something that's almost where it becomes on the fly or winging it, where when we start a program, or we start, let's say, the season, everybody gets the same program. So we have Train Heroic, which is an online training platform. So, the men's volleyball team has their program, the men's soccer team has their program. But from there, then we'll adjust. Hey, I know it says back squat, but those hurt my back, or it's bugging my hip, or whatever. And then I'll make adjustments for them. So I have some athletes who they don't back squat, or they don't do Bulgarian split squats because of, whatever aspect that they're dealing with. And so I will make adjustments for them. Early on in the season, or like in preseason, there's a little bit of less give and take. So for me, to give you an example, like our track and field team, we spent a whole month learning cleans, and then we spent a whole month learning snatches. And now that they're in season, they have Olympic lift of choice. So they can choose snatches or cleans, whichever one felt better. They're able to progress more. Could they get into a front rack position? No, then you're probably doing snatches. So I like to expose my athletes to a bunch of different movements early on in their preseason or in their off season, so that when we get to this time of year, a lot of my teams, like, they're probably 90% of my squat programming right now is just squat of choice. It's like, do whatever, like, we got playoffs this weekend, do whatever's going to feel good for you. Do whatever, you are able to get a load through your legs, but you're not cooking your back, or you're not, you don't have crappy form, or just certain technique points that we've worked on. Right. So the individualization or the siloing largely just comes down to those one-on-one conversations, where it's like, hey, this is the program, but let me know if something's bugging you, or things I'm noticing, like, hey, wow, you actually cannot get into that position. We're going to try something different. And then we kind of go from there. Right.
Do you tend to, based on that, it seems like you tend to do more like of a general sort of conditioning as opposed to very specific. Like, with a large team, I guess it's very difficult to get individual. Or do you find yourself kind of maybe able, you wanted to do that, but time constraints and practicality wise, you find that you can't do that, so you end up going just shooting for the low hanging fruit, which is like a general sort of.
I want to do specific stuff so bad, and I learned, like, most of the learning I'm doing is about, like, doing specific stuff for soccer, specific stuff for rugby, and it's like, man, this is super sweet. And then I get into our little weight room with 30 athletes in there, and I go, yeah, no, that ain't gonna happen. Like, we're just gonna squat, we're gonna do push-ups, you're gonna do chin-ups, and you're gonna leave. So our programming has largely, it used to be more specific when I first started, and I was more eager and like, oh, we're just going to try this. And then I just kept hitting my head against the wall, being like, this is not working.
Narrowing it.
Exactly. And so then I just kind of go into, let's make it more general. And now I'm a big proponent of training should be general. Like, if you want to do sport specific training, go play your sport. Like, why are you coming to the weight room to get better at your jump shot? Go work on your jump shot. Like, absolutely, the physical traits and getting stronger and faster and jumping higher obviously help with sports. Otherwise I wouldn't have a job. But to me, it's like, I'm not going to do too much specific work. I'm going to make sure that the work we're doing allows you to do the specific work in practice to the best of your ability, so that you can actually get better at it. So I would for sure say we're a lot more general. There are times a year, like, as we prep for, let's say, a preseason or this playoff time, it is a little more specific because we're trying to eke out, that 1% to 2% extra. But largely it's just, hey, like I said, like, let's just get stronger. I'm just going to make you a better athlete, whether you're a soccer player, a basketball player, or a disc golf athlete. I'm going to make you the best athlete I can make you. And then you go take that athleticism that I gave you and you turn it into a farther throw or a harder hit or, a harder tackle. Like, it's up to the sport coach and the sport to dictate, what the physical attribute I give that athlete becomes.
Yeah. I mentioned Charlie Francis. I did a fair bit of interaction with him, and I worked with Ben Johnson for a bit. And I remember Charlie telling me, you know, one of the reasons why, very similar to yourself, like he had I think he had about 30 kids in his group at one point, and it's very difficult to manage all these kids, and they're sort of like all over the track sometimes, and so he narrowed it down to just like a few lifts. And for Ben in particular, he literally only had, I think, it was squat, bench, sometimes incline, lat pull down. He didn't do deadlifts. He didn't do any Olympic lifts. He wasn't very good at it, so he never did it. And basically a lot of medicine ball work, different types of throws, abs, and obviously sprinting. That was it. And you look at the program thinking, wow, that's pretty basic. But yeah, like you said, I think the specificness really comes from the sport. There's a lot of development that comes from the sport itself. And the practices and stuff like that. It's very difficult to duplicate that in the weight room. Charlie told me, he said, you know, name me one piece of apparatus that allows a sprinter's leg to move close to 80 kilometers an hour. It's impossible. I said, so he said, so, and Ben did do, he did leg curls occasionally. But if you saw the weight room that they worked with, it would make your room like a LA Fitness, bro. It was like literally, I think a 600 square foot room. It had a squat rack, lifting platform, which is very, very basic. It's all beat up. No bumper plates, just Olympic York plates. A bench, flat bench, which is bolted into the ground. The cage is also bolted in the ground. You had a incline bench and a rudimentary pulley system, the old style with the cables, and you'd have to flip the weight because you had a kind of like a U thing, and you would flip the weight. And the weight you wanted less weight, you take it off and you move it along the track and you bring it down. Then you use less weight. Yeah. And that was it. And they had a universal, classic universal.
Nice.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was the weight room. It wasn't fancy at all. And I Mark McCoy, I worked with Mark McCoy a little bit. He told me that's how they trained. He actually even had less of a weight room.
Dang. Yeah.
They did a lot of Olympic lifts. But yeah, that was like I think you kind of nailed a really interesting point, which is it's very difficult to go specific in a sport that requires a sport to actually play it, you know.
Yep.
Like and so all you're kind of doing is kind of working general qualities that maybe lend to that sport. But yeah, that's a very interesting point you made there. So give me some examples of some interesting cases that you work with that you know. I always say you learn from the people that you fail upon, but you know, it's up to you if you want to talk some of your failures. Maybe be careful about that because your employers are watching.
Yeah. There's a couple interesting stories. Like one of the ones for me is almost like our men's rugby team as a group. So our men's rugby program started the same time, or it got reincarnated because we had a program back in like the 80s, but anyway, it got reincarnated when I first started. So my first year was our men's rugby program's first year. And in that first year, there was a bunch of kids that like obviously weren't playing because not everybody plays. And the kids that don't play, like they come and they lift with me. And a lot of them would then go into the fitness center like later that day and, you know, do another session, or on their off day, they'd be like maxing out their deadlifts. And it used to drive me crazy. Like I used to like get mad at them. Like, what do you do? Like my analogy was always, I'm a chef and I'm giving you the recipe. And by you, I get it that you like sugar in your cupcakes, but by you going to the fitness center and doing extra deadlifts, you're adding extra sugar to the recipe,
right?
Which actually messes it up. And then it makes the cake taste bad. So that was kind of my big thing and my big crusade. But I always noticed that the older guys never did extra work. Like the third year guys, like they would do their lifts with me. They maybe do some extra like biking or whatever, but you know, you wouldn't see them do that. And sure enough, those first years that in their second year, they started to play a little bit more and they started to do less extra work in the fitness center. And then once they're in their third year and they were beat up and playing every weekend, they didn't do extra work in the fitness center. And it just became something that I realized is maybe a little bit of a maturing process, but when you're young, you can handle that. Like my workouts aren't crazy. Like we're not doing triple backflips into a push jerk and whatever. Like we're, like we mentioned, it's pretty basic. And so those young kids probably aren't pushing a ton of weight, and so they can actually recover from it quicker, so they are able to train more or harder. But they're not playing, so they're missing that stimulus on the weekend, and so they actually are able to do that extra work. So for me, it was just a really good learning opportunity of like, don't stress out when I see a freshman or a second year, do extra work in the fitness center. Like if they're doing something detrimental, obviously talk to them about it, but like just let them do it. Like I want to also cultivate, a love of fitness and a love of training in my athletes, so that when they graduate, when they retire from sports, that they keep training. And so who am I to, kind of try to snub that right away when they're like 18, 19 years old. Anyway, so that was kind of a big thing for me, was just learning that, they'll learn, they'll come around, they'll end up playing more, and then they'll kind of fully trust the process once they've kind of learned it. So that was something that really used to bug me. And now I kind of just smile when I see, freshmen doing extra work. Part of it's like, hey, good for you. And I've also seen it on the flip side. Like I would rather have a freshman that wants to do extra work than that hates the weight room and is barely even showing up with me. So I'm trying to,
good point.
cultivate like I said, cultivate a love of fitness and kind of get them into it that way. A really good success story, I guess, for me, was we had a women's soccer player, and it's funny, I was actually thinking about her this morning. A women's soccer player who didn't play a ton in her first like 3 years. Maybe got in the odd game, but was, very rarely in the 18. And then in her fourth year, started to play a little bit, but was actually contemplating quitting. Was like just not having it. It was just having a hard time with the coaching staff, but loved the weight room. Like was just crushing it. And we had a lot of good conversations, a lot of crying in my office. And, she was kind of struggling through things. And I remember her calling me one day, like I think it was on a weekend when I was at home. I just remember being on a walk with my wife, and she called me and she was like, I think I'm going to quit. And I don't even remember what I said to her. But I just remember, essentially talking her out of it, being like, hey, no, like, this is, as much as you are, struggling, like you have 1 year left. Like you want to see this through. If you quit now, you're going to regret it. Anyway, that fifth year, she ends up playing for us a little bit, ends up being a starter by the time playoffs comes around. And she actually ended up going, I think I can't remember her stats, but she ended up contributing to the team in a major way. We went to nationals that year. I think we lost in the national final that year. And then she ended up going and playing pro for a couple of years.
Wow.
After that. So, and she's obviously, thanked me for, all I did for her. And really for me, it wasn't a moment of like, man, I'm this hero. Like I'm a god. Like it was more just a good realization that as a coach, we have a way bigger impact than just, hey, congratulations, your squat went up 15 pounds.
That's right.
We impact these kids on a whole different level. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to work in a university setting, was I wanted to impact kids on their most crucial time as young adults. Because when you start as an 18-year-old freshman, by the time you finish when you're 21, 22, 23, you're a completely different person. You've become, in my mind, who you're going to be for the rest of your life. And so I have a really good opportunity, for 3 hours a week, I get to see these kids and impact them in a way that will hopefully help them become, better business people and better leaders and better, mothers and fathers and husbands and wives. And so for this athlete was one of the first ones that I kind of really dove into that and had, I remember, having conversations with them, like I said, in my office multiple times, and just that phone call of like, no, like I know you and I know you can keep going. And this is something that, you're going to regret if you give up. And then, yeah, like I said, she went on and ended up playing pro. And it was a really, part of it was a cool feather in my cap of like, wow, I did a good job. But it was also just brought almost like more weight and gravity to my position of like, again, I have way more impact than I think. And so it's something that I need to take seriously every day, and every interaction. Like I have an opportunity to positively or negatively impact everybody. And so that was a really cool example of a positive impact I had. And yeah, it's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, that's, I guess this is where you have is it a job, or is it a profession, right? And a lot of people don't really realize that a conditioning coach, even coaches itself, it is just a coach on a team. Sport is a microcosm of life, and it allows you to sort of make mistakes without having the social ramifications for the most part. Although nowadays it's a little different with social media. You can do a bad play and it's permanent. It's like, remember that time you screwed up? Here's a replay of it. But anyways, yeah, it's moments like that. Yeah, it takes a village to raise a child, as they say. So you need obviously the parents at a certain point sort of go out of the picture, and now you have your peers, and then from there you have the people that you sort of like authority figures, sort of thing, and you impact them, and that's a neat story. That is a really neat story there. That might be if there's any directors going to listen to this podcast, it may be like a movie or something. I don't know. I can see a script. I can see a script in that one. Only thing is we probably have to maybe doctor the ending. Oh, she wins a championship, and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'd have to win. She'd have to be MVP, all that
something
stuff.
like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's pretty cool. So you obviously liaison with, because you mentioned it earlier. You're talking about you have your therapy staff. Now, some therapy staff are very, they're kind of very isolated. They kind of do their thing. They don't tell you anything. Then there's other people that are, a little bit more open, and they want to share it, and you guys collaborate a bit more. What do you find, do you have like other professions aside from, like, I'm assuming athletic therapists, and then you have your physios, chiros. Do you have anybody else like out in left field there? You got like some people that do Reiki. What sort of people do you liaison with in terms of in a professional perspective?
Yeah, so we have our athletic therapy team here at Trinity, which includes athletic therapists. We've got some chiros, some physios. Some of them are like staff, and some of them are just kind of contracted out. But I communicate with them quite frequently. Like we have a Google Sheets that keeps track of kind of every athlete's injury, and we can touch base on that. But I make a point to go and visit them and see them face to face at least once a week, and just chat about some deeper stuff. Outside of that, like, I have obviously other S&C practitioners that I communicate with quite frequently, but from other areas, like we've got some not necessarily sports psychologists, but some psychology or counselors, I should say. We've got counselors on campus that will communicate with, less about like sports psych and performance, but more about like mental health things. And then from the nutrition side, I cover the nutrition stuff here. So I'm a nutrition coach. So I'll take that on, but I do have, quite a few dietitians in my back pocket that I can either ask questions of or refer out to if, obviously there's some deeper things I can't cover. But for most part, a lot of that stuff comes just in-house through myself and then through our athletic therapy team.
Right. Do you have any chiropractors? Is that something that you guys tap into as well?
Yep. So we have a chiro that comes at least once a week. It might be twice a week now. Athletes can sign up for and kind of get that work done.
Right. Any fringe sort of practitioners, osteopaths, structural body workers?
We did have one of our physios was also certified, or was osteo as well. But he's no longer on staff. I think one of our ATs now, I think, might be an osteo, one of our new guys. I'm not 100% certain, but we try to cover obviously as many things as possible, as well as I know our therapy team for sure has a long list of other practitioners that they communicate with, that they liaison with, so that if they're too busy, if it's a case they just can't solve, they obviously refer out as well. So we try to involve not too many cooks in the kitchen, but we try to involve the right cook in the kitchen for the right spot.
Yeah. And so what, as a S&C coach, what lessons would you give up and coming people, or what would you say was some of the key takeaways so far in your career that you would, if you were to talk to a person that was your junior and they're up and coming, what would you give them? What kind of advice would you give them?
The main thing I would tell them is build relationships, because, and I've said this 1,000 times.
That's a good, that's a good one.
Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Like relationships,
yeah,
are going to dictate. I've actually just heard it. I think I just saw it on Instagram the other day. Basically said another way, it was, kids don't listen to people they don't like. And
yes.
I love that. That just simplified it. It's like, be a likable person. And so, especially in the weight room, because 99% of these kids didn't come here because of our badass 1,100 square foot weight room, or because I'm such a great coach. They came here to play their sport. They came here because of the academics. And a lot of them actually don't even like lifting weights. So the least I can do is be a likable person, so that at least they tolerate coming to hang out in the weight room, with a half funny, younger dude. Like, my job is to make sure that the environment is set so that, they can work hard, and it's set up so that we, have good culture and all those things that everybody talks about. But I think a lot of it comes down to, hey, if you're a young coach, like, be a likable person, be somebody who knows more than just the X's and O's of S&C. Like, watch movies, go on social media. As much as I hate social media, I go on it so that when somebody says, "Oh man, did you see that thing?" I can go, "Yeah." Or I check my TSN app every day, because when an athlete, wants to talk about the Laker game last night, I don't want to go, who are the Lakers? Like, I want to be like, "Oh yeah, that was, what do you think about that Luka trade?" Like, just things like that allow me to be relatable, which as I get older and athletes obviously stay the same age, that relatableness becomes harder and harder to get. But that would be the big thing, is develop relationships. And then from there, make sure you know your stuff. The analogy I like to give is, like, we always talk about, you can't lead a horse to water, or you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So to me, the relationship side is what gets that horse to drink. But if you're going to get him to drink, that water better be good. You better make sure that the programs that you're giving aren't just something you just printed off bodybuilding.com, or, hey, this is just what we did when I was in high school, or when I was an athlete. And even, like, as I talked about my program, it's not rocket science. It's not, we're doing, 1% increases on our hang cleans, and then we're doing a reverse, hyperextension, a concurrent model. Like, what, people throwing out all these words. It's like, just make sure that the work you're giving them is making them stronger. It's making them faster. You can do that by testing. You can do that, by, once again, getting a little clicker. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you are getting them better. Because if you don't get results, it doesn't matter how good of a person you are. People aren't going to trust you. So I remember I think it was our athletic director in one of my early years, we were just chatting about, like, leadership and stuff. And he said, "Cole, you don't want to be a lovable loser. You don't want to be a lovable loser. You don't want to be somebody that people really like, but it's like, yeah, but he sucks." Like, we're like, I love going to see Cole because he tells funny jokes and he makes me feel good about myself, but I actually don't get better. You want to draw the line between, he's a good dude, but also we get crap done and we get better there. So that would be my thing, is priority, develop relationships. But then when you develop relationships and you get and they actually do your stuff, it better be good.
I work in a different environment. So I work more one-on-one right now. And so I have little kids that I work with and stuff. Even with some of the adults I work with, I work with a couple actually. And it's quite hilarious because the husband and wife, they have their own, I play mini golf. So I have a big piece of turf in my gym, and we kind of handicap it. So I'm a pretty decent putter. So I make usually about a 30-foot putt. I have to make that. Nice. Putt. They have about a 10-foot putt to make, right? So it balances out, because if they would even get a 30-foot. It's like, I'm actually competitive with a 30-foot. So I give my little pat in the back. But what I do with the kids, though, it's hilarious, because at the end, right, I said, all right, we flip, who's going first kind of thing. And so they actually like, at the end, like, we play this mini golf. And so it's like a kind of a little treat. So I can imagine, like, in your gym, like, if you had time, I mean, obviously with time, and they'll be kind of, at suspect, the head coach walks in the team, and the whole team is playing mini golf. What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you do stuff like that? Like, you kind of mix it up a little bit. Hey guys, we're going to do this today. And it's almost like it may not be related, but it is related. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So I actually, during COVID, obviously everything was online and people were, at home doing training. And I got a really good idea from Colin McCausland, who is a strength coach at Queens. And he started just these weekly challenges of like, you get the whole department to try, and, you rank, record, and publish essentially like who is better. And so
Right.
I started challenges here. So I call them the headmasters challenges. And it's a task that, 4 times a semester, or 4 weeks, I guess, a semester, I'll come up with a challenge, and the whole school or the whole athletic department competes in it. So, for example, this past week was how quickly can you tie your shoes? So like you get a teammate to time you, boom. And if you're the top person, I have a whiteboard, like a leaderboard and everything. And if you're the top scorer on your team, you get on the whiteboard and you get a little sticker that says you're a champ. If you're the top male or female scorer, you get a little keychain that says you're a champ. And agreed, like it used to be things like, holding an L sit, or how long can you hang from a pull-up bar with one arm, like a little more physical challenges. And we've done golfing. Like my daughter for Christmas actually got me a little, like a dog with like a mouth that you can putt into. And so that was one of our challenges, was how far away can you sink a putt, and how many putts can you sink in a row from a certain distance. And yeah, so some of them will be related, but more often than not, it's just something fun. It's something that, like you said, just to mix it up, to get them excited about coming to lift. It allows them to compete against everyone else, because that women's rugby player, she hates that women's soccer player is a better scorer than her. She doesn't know who she is, but she just hates seeing that other name. So it's like, okay, I'm going to beat her. So 100% we will do that. And sometimes it gets a little out of hand, to the point where I have to tell athletes, hey, like you got to go do your squats, like stop golfing out here. But yeah, 100%, like you've got to find ways to, to maybe, wave a carrot in front of the athlete sometimes and make it fun. But I think it helps the environment. It doesn't hurt it, as long as you don't do too much of it. But it becomes a talking point, and competitive, and athletes are competitive. So it's like, let's let them compete.
Yeah, I took a course in university and I did it. I think we probably all did it. We took courses to kind of boost up the GPA. I wasn't the smartest tool in the shed, so I had to find ways to stay in the program. So one of the courses I took was called Theories of Play. And I'm thinking, how hard this can be. It's got to be an easy course. It turned out to be kind of challenging. It was actually a bit of essay writing and stuff. But the guy that Joseph Levy, I'm not sure if he's around anymore, but he was a nice man. And I remember probably 2 of the 3 things that he taught, and I always forget the third one. But the definition of play, according to Joe Levy, was the suspension of reality, an internal locus of control. And I always forget the third one. It's probably why I got a B+. But I'm trying to think. I think it was kind of like something to alluding to the idea of free flow. So you kind of made up the rules as you went, right? And so those are the 3 things that you sort of constituted play. And children will do that. If you watch, you buy a present or something like that, the present maybe keeps their attention for about 5 minutes or so, and then it's the box that it came in. And so they would make up stuff. And so that's play, right? And adults tend to stifle that sometimes. Oh, you got to do it this way, and it's just like, let it go, let it just happen. And in weight room environment, which is very interesting, because you are kind of formally structuring this thing. Oh, you have to do a squat, you got to do it. And then now you have this other environment where, hey, let's encourage a little bit of getting to know each other a little bit on a different plane, informally, less structured. Obviously, you do probably have some rules with this shoelace tying game, but you get the idea. It's like basically you're allowing for this creativity and spontaneity to be in the presence of yourself and in the weight room. So they don't mind coming to the weight room, like you said. That you have some athletes that are not too keen on probably lifting. Maybe they've never done it before to a certain degree. And now you kind of force in this little environment that you have with you for an hour, a couple of times a week, maybe. And so you have to kind of like, how do I get this person to kind of like this activity? And it's almost like you entertain this, they start to like that. Oh, I don't mind going to see Cole twice a week now. It's kind of fun, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So which is kind of cool. It's a nice way you kind of integrated that. So Cole, wrapping up here, if somebody were to get a hold of you, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I mean, that's how I met you, through LinkedIn. But what's give me the handles.
Absolutely. So yeah, so on LinkedIn is just my name, Cole.Hergott. On Twitter, I'm at chergott94. I use Twitter primarily to consume information. I don't post a ton of stuff on there. On Instagram, I don't personally have Instagram, but I run our Trinity Western University strength and conditioning one. So if you reach out on there, I'll get back to you, but it's at TWU Strength. And that's where I'll post, some tips. I'll post kind of what we're doing in the weight room. So if you want to see more about what we're doing, that's probably where I'd go. But otherwise, like for me, I use email like text message. So my email is cole.hergott at TWU.CA. If people have questions, people want to chat more, if you reach out on there, I 100% will get back to you. And then we can kind of, set up a phone call or a Zoom or whatever it is. But that would be kind of the best ways to get in touch.
Perfect. Any closing remarks?
I just appreciate you having me on. As you can probably tell, I can chat about this stuff all day, and I love talking to other people that could chat about this stuff all day. And it's fun for me. It's just fun because I was actually reflecting on this the other day, how I used to really love school because it's fun to get to prove that you know stuff. Like you do your studying and then you do your exam, and then it's like, hey, I got an A+, I got an A-. Like, wow, I'm smart. Whereas now I read a whole bunch of stuff and then that question might never come up, or what I mean? It's like, I didn't get to share why, all this tendon research I studied. So I love getting to chat about this kind of stuff. And even, I love when my interns ask me questions, because then I get to nerd out on them. So I just appreciate you having me on and allowing me to nerd out a little bit.
No, listen, it's always good to have different people. My podcast, from the time I started this podcast, I made it a mandate not to always look for and don't take this as a slight. It's to look for the guys on far left field, because I always found that people outside that sort of like popular sort of influencer, S&C coach, may have the top, working with a professional team, and he's probably got an Instagram handle that got like 1 million followers and stuff like that. But sometimes those people not always have all the answers. And so I like to go out to different people. If you go to my podcast, you see I have different people on there, people you probably even heard of. But I find people like this to be more interesting and to develop, because these are the guys that are sort of watching. They're the ones sort of for the most part watching if I use the analogy of a fishbowl, they're on the outside looking at the fishbowl, so they can see a lot more what's going on from that perspective. And so then they'll take in what they need to take in. And like we've just told me through this podcast, you've sort of, here's the ideal, and you sort of like, well, here's my reality. How do I take this and kind of use some of that and to formulate what I need? And so all the people on my podcast kind of like have sort of done that. They sort of found out a particular niche in what they do, and they managed to make it work, which is really cool. So I really enjoyed having you, and appreciate you allowing me to have you on my podcast. It's always challenging sometimes to get people to take the time, and because some people always look at it, well, who are you? Kind of like, look at my numbers, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to go on that podcast. I had some interesting people that probably go on very big podcasts, and they've been very nice to me and come on my podcast, which is really nice, and they're able to have them. So I really appreciate your time to share what you do in terms of as a conditioning coach for a large number of people. And I really appreciate you reaching out and being a guest on TheSystem.CA. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And we definitely have to keep in touch and talk. There's some stuff we'll definitely talk to you about later on, but we'll definitely keep in touch. And so we'll sign off. Any last things you want to say hi to your mom or kids?
Well, my kids probably won't listen to this, but my mom probably will, so I can say hi, Mom. So she'll listen.
Okay. All right. So we'll be in touch. We'll talk then. All right, Cole. You take care.
Thanks, Yusuf.
Right. You're welcome. Bye.
THESYSTEM.CA podcast disclaimer. We're not here to tell you that we know everything. We're just here to present possibilities. The information presented is by no way intended as medical advice or as a substitute for medical counseling. The information should be used in conjunction with the guidance and care of your physician. Consult your physician before beginning this program, as you would with any other exercise and nutrition program. If you choose not to obtain consent of your physician and or work with your physician throughout the duration of your time using the recommendations given, you are agreeing to accept full responsibility for your actions. By continuing, you recognize that despite all precautions on the part of the system, the art and science of coaching, there are risks of injuries or illness which can occur because of your use of the aforementioned information, and you expressly assume risks and waive, relinquish, and release any claim which you have against the system, the art and science of coaching, or any of its affiliates as a result of any future physical or illness incurred in connection with or as a result of the use or misuse of this information given. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or any other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the system, the art and science of coaching, except in the case of brief quotations embodied in critical reviews and certain other non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the content, please hit the subscribe button. Check out THESYSTEM.CA for more information on services and more content like this, and also products. Take care.